Hello, welcome back. We have all your crypto needs covered on the Q&A stage today. That was a great session with Charles. And next up, we've got another great one. So get your questions ready. They've been really good all day. Hands in the air, and my two colleagues will come along with microphones and get your questions. For our next speaker, who is the founder of Tezos, Kathleen Breitman. Kathleen, welcome.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm very well. Thank
Good.
you.
How's your WebSummit experience? Have you been speaking on other stages yet?
I have. I spoke earlier this morning, but my understanding is that Ben McKenzie was scheduled for after me, but he's had to cancel.
He's had to cancel.
And I am the most disappointed about this.
Well,
because I had a massive crush on Ryan Atwood, the OC. So this is very devastating. And then you hit me with the 1-2 punch that he also doesn't like crypto. So I'm like, oh no, this is a lot of dreams have died in sequence.
I'm glad you broke that bad news to the audience and not me, yes. But the good news is that means we get more time with you.
Yes.
So that's great. Before we get into it with the audience, it's been a roller coaster year for crypto. How have you guys navigated the stormy waters?
It's always a roller coaster year in crypto. It just sometimes it's going up and sometimes it's going down. I guess it's an Icelandic saying, there's no bad weather, only bad clothes. So I think, this type of turbulence is what you make of it.
Okay, so it's to be expected. All right, well, let's get the questions going. So hands in the air, and like I said, my two colleagues will bring microphones over. Don't be shy. We've had great questions all day from people, so let's keep that going. Okay, while people are thinking, maybe they're just digesting their food. Oh, wait, we've got one over here. Oh, and one over here. So let's go with this gentleman here first, and then we'll go over to this side. Yes, go ahead.
Hi there. Is that on? Yeah.
Yeah.
So how early do you think we are in the space in Web3?
What?
How early do you think we are in the Web3 space?
Geez, I don't even think there's a great definition for Web3 yet. I think, when most people talk about Web3, what they mean is some sort of knee-jerk reaction against the ad-based model of the web, which everyone's calling Web 2. But I don't think we knew what Web 2 was when Web 2 came to the fore, so I think it's super early days. What I like about Web 3 as a concept, and what I think most people mean when they talk about it, is this idea of shifting power back to users of the web, and basically allowing people to have a newfound relationship with both the data that they communicate, but also exactly how they interact with people and being more empowered writ large, which is a nice vision, and in some ways it harkens to like the early writing about the internet. And so the idea is to basically use a blockchain in a lot of instances, which can enforce scarcity and do lots of fun stuff, as we all know, to basically shift this power, kind of away from the tech oligopoly that has emerged over the last 15 years. So, that's what I think people mean when they talk about Web3, but I don't think there's like a fixed, nice definition the way there are for some other technical concepts in the space.
Is that going to happen, though? You said like shifting the power away from the big tech that's developed in Web 2, or will they just enter that space and take over again?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's the case that like the smart companies you see experimenting with these different models. There's a few gaming companies that use Tezos, for example, to track assets in the game, and part of it is experimenting with blockchain technology writ large and kind of doing that bit. But part of it is also like it's kind of a tax on big companies to have to store everything in their servers and sort of be responsible for some of the liability of managing a very large community. Sometimes it's more of liability than anything else. So I think that's where you've seen like some interesting experimentation, and then you've seen sort of like decentralization theater, like, oh, we know blockchain, we do X, Y, Z, and you're like, you kind of search under the surface, you're like, oh dear God, that's very far away from what we were talking about. It's also the case that like this technology emerged basically in a sort of cheeky way, and it's very much it's antagonizing kind of institutions in the sense that. It's meant to serve a similar function that's like naturally been centralized with the web, and so I don't think you're going to find disruption from the people it's meant to disrupt. I think it's going to be something that pushes on you, and either you adopt or you die.
Yeah, they're happy with the status quo. Okay, do we have another question over here?
Yeah, hi, nice to meet you. My name is Bruno Ver, CEO, co-founder at Niftify. So smart contract exploits risk remain a major barrier to entry for large-scale projects and protocols. is there a plan to implement a mitigation solution at the blockchain level for Tezos?
That's a good question. This stuff is smart contract safety, basically. So yeah, I mean, there's good parts and bad parts, obviously, of using a blockchain for your enterprise. I think that what we've seen in sort of corporate adoption for the Tezos network, at least, is one big selling feature is that a lot of the Tezos smart contract language was designed by programming language theorists who had expertise in formal verification. And so the whole entire, beginning of Michelson, which is its programming language, is meant to be formally verified, meaning making proofs about conjecture about the code. And so arguably that's like a better approach to security. It was originally used by rocket scientists and things like this, because if you're sending $1 billion worth of R&D into space, you want to have some assurances that it's going to go in the right direction. The idea we had in kind of thinking about formal verification with smart contracts was like, geez, you could have a smart contract that holds, $1 billion, and so you should treat it like a rocket that's being launched into space. So that approach and that sort of discipline have been paid off really well in the Tezos ecosystem. But I think, formal verification is a good tool. We're getting a lot of really good progress in helping people write smart contracts. And the concept of this has been around since 1994. And really there weren't smart contract platforms until Ethereum launched in 2015, 2016 at scale. So it's it's an emerging technology, and I wouldn't recommend putting all of your eggs in one basket. But if you are going to launch something that's very high stakes, take a look at things like what we have with the Tezos stack and formal verification as a tool at least.
Great. Okay. Any more questions? Hands in the air. My colleagues will get over to you. Oh, one over here. Yes, sir.
Is this on?
Yep.
Hi, Kathleen. So I was a Tezos ICO investor, by the way, so thank you very much for all your efforts and your team's efforts. I was really interested in Tezos initially because you guys really led some of the technology at the time that was, I consider, pioneering. Upgradable blockchain, mitigating hard forks, formal type contracts that you just mentioned, and you were one of the first large blockchains doing proof of stake. What I'm wondering is, I've kind of faded away and discovered other blockchains as well, but I wanted to know what Tezos is doing as far as new pioneering technologies. I think you guys have, from what I've seen, been spending a lot of time on doing the upgrading to keep up with other innovations, but I want to know what you guys might be bringing in the, next couple of years that's new to the space in blockchains.
Well, thank you for the kind words and indeed the support. That's very kind of you. To your gracious compliment, yes, Tezos was one of the first major, big blockchains to launch with proof of stake. It's a pain in the ass to do it, frankly, from a coordination perspective, which is why most cryptocurrencies before it launched with proof of work, which until recently Ethereum ran on, Bitcoin runs on, so on and so forth. So that was one big innovation that Tezos pioneered. But the blockchain upgrades pretty regularly. So basically, every few months or few weeks, there's a proposal made by anyone to the Tezos ecosystem. Basically, a vote is held, and if a supermajority of people say that they'd like to test out this feature to see if it's a viable upgrade to the protocol, a testnet is spun up, and a few weeks later, reconvene, and then a supermajority has to say, yes, we want this, and then an upgrade is pushed out. So that's happened 11 times in the Tezos ecosystem. A lot of what has been great is that it's anticipated a lot of the problems that other chains have had. Meaning, so gas on a lot of these other networks that are smart contract platforms, it tends to be exorbitant, and it's sort of it becomes a problem very quickly once there's adoption. The Tezos ecosystem, through its upgrade process, has actually been making gas more efficient so that when increased use yields, increased demand for gas, that becomes a moot point. So it's a lot of anticipating problems that we're going to have, addressing them, and doing it in a thoughtful way. But to your bigger question, which is what's the next big thing? I think scaling is it, right? So that's something where my co-founder and husband Arthur really pioneered an approach that has been adopted by some other projects, but I think where we have actually a pretty big lead is in having a truly decentralized scaling solution. So a lot of cryptos will say that they're they can do high throughput or whatever, but basically they're centralized entities. They'll do something like have a cutesy little multi-sig, which gets you into some pretty bad territory in terms of hacks, and to the question about safety before. So I think basically, scaling is the next big thing, because frankly, we've seen mainstream adoption in some form or another, and the limiting factor seems to be the capacity of the blockchain itself, and that's been a constant, sort of a constant struggle in the industry. I think we have a really credible path forward. I think you'll see some news, probably in the next few months about what we think we can do in the next few upgrades in the ecosystem. But that's in the spirit of getting mainstream adoption and actually being able to handle all this increased demand, which is wonderful. But I think scaling is really the killer for the next few years. It was for the longest time proof of stake because Ethereum hadn't yet transitioned. Thankfully, we've moved on to different topics, and so I think scaling is the next big thing.
Great. Any more questions? Hands in the air. Good. Lots over. One over. Well, you've already had one, so let's get someone who hasn't had one, please.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about scaling, because it feels that Tezos is a bit isolated to other blockchain because it's not EVM compatible, so less developer on it, there are less application compatible with Tezos. So I was wondering what would be the future of Tezos, and are you bringing more application on Tezos and more like compatibility with other chain?
Yeah, there are projects to address just that. So a big thing that people do is use the Ethereum virtual machine instead of building their own. You could argue that it's kind of a good differentiator for the Tezos ecosystem that it's not reliant on this one thing. Like, again, this is all pretty new technology. The EVM wasn't around 10 years ago. It may not be the best thing to put your eggs in that basket, but but yeah, I mean, you have to have like some sort of compatibility. Everyone wants to do some cross-chain feature. So there are a number of different projects within the ecosystem that are meant to address that. But I think, the more pioneering work is like, there's a lot of really good accessible wallets, smart contract languages, and things like that sit on the Tezos stack, which are worth looking at in their own right, I would argue. I prefer the Kukai wallet to anything I've seen on other chains, for example, in terms of its dynamism. So, I mean, it's in some ways I agree with you. Like, it is a little bit more of an island, but I would see that as a virtue in the end of the day.
Great. Do we have another question? Yeah, so hand go up there. Go for it.
I just wanted to ask about culture and the community in Tezos. I think when people look at across the Web3 and the blockchain ecosystem, my mental model for thinking about it is think about different countries, and every country almost has its own culture, its own language almost. To me, Tezos stands out from artists to builders to people making art on NFTs to people creating really innovative smart contracts. People tend to be a lot more intentional about what they do in Tezos and more focused on what's happening beneath the surface rather than the price action. I wondered, is that something that you've thought about and been thinking about when you're developing Tezos and when you're creating that ecosystem, or is it something that's come about by itself almost?
That's a very nice question. Thank you. Intensely flattering that you'd characterize it that way. I jokingly call Tezos Greenwich Village in the 1960s because it's where all the cool kids are hanging out. My husband's French, so he says it's Paris in the 1910s. Pick one or the other. But I guess it's the same vibe, which is like there's a really tremendous amount of authenticity in the Tezos community. I think it's for a variety of reasons. It's not highly centralized, meaning like. There was a fundraiser, which the gentleman mentioned, which had, basically created a grassroots community. On top of that, like there's what you see is what you get, right? Like there's no grand scheme, there's no like marketing campaign, there's no roadmap being shoved down your throat, and that is a very deliberate choice because it's kind of like, well, everyone's zigging, you zag, and a lot of other projects have had like sort of charismatic figureheads tell you what's going to happen when, and that's just never been my style. It's never been my husband's style because at the end of the day, we're I think ideologues when it comes to whether or not this stuff matters is predicated on whether or not it's decentralized. If you're just trading in one master for another, a charismatic figurehead, like that's not progress. What's progress is actually like empowering people and letting them do their thing. So in some sense it's deliberate, but then I'm also like extraordinarily blessed because cryptocurrencies for the longest time have had this sort of speculative fervor aspect to it, and the tone that changed when the art community started to come towards cryptocurrencies was like the best breath of fresh air, and it couldn't have come at a better time. So I'm really very thrilled because a lot of like genuinely very gifted artists love the Tezos community. It's one of those popular chains with contemporary artists, and I think that's just a culture thing. I sometimes get billed as the CEO of Tezos, which is like kind of a misnomer. I'm like the co-founder, so it's easy to suggest that like there's some sort of title in there. But if I had to describe my job, I'm the janitor. There's a great community. I'm here to clean up some messes, but like by and large, like the thing runs the way it's supposed to, and that's mostly because people I think feel empowered by the governance model, and they feel empowered by the ability to kind of like actually have your voice heard and not just have everything thrown at you. So it does make us very different. Several questions have suggested this, but I don't mind that. That's not bad.
So if you're Greenwich in the 1960s, does that make you Joan Baez or a Bob Dylan kind of figure? Or?
I relate more to Bob Dylan, but...
Okay, I like that analogy. All right, more questions? We've got a hand at the back there. Oh, you got a mic. Great.
Hi there. My question is on STO. You guys have currently over $1 billion of value managed on EquiSafe, and you famously tokenized a very nice French real estate in Versailles. Are you guys looked at tokenizing private debt, which is, I think, an interesting use case?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking as a potential business, application, like by all means, I'm Kathleen at Tezos.com. Send me an email. But it's one of the early things that the ecosystem kind of flocked to was basically tokenizing real estate. So it's a very simple use case, but it takes a lot of like I guess mental leap to think about a token representing ownership in one of these things. I think the more complex structures are kind of wrought with a bit more trickiness. But I know that we're looking at things like precious metals and things like that, which is all really fun. I think private debt is a little bit more difficult to wrap a head around, but I also think like no time like the present, and Lord knows the existing environment is certainly inviting to that use case.
Great questions now. They're coming thick and fast, so hands in the air. Oh, we've got one over here. Yep.
Hi, my name is Flavia. Thank you for being here and sharing some of your knowledge with us. I wanted to ask, last year Tezos partnered with Art Basel, one of the leading art fair worldwide, but the NFT market is really volatile in comparison to the traditional art market. For this reason, I wanted to ask you, where do you see this kind of partnership going? And if, in your opinion, how can the art world profit from the blockchain technology, and in particular for Tezos? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. The Tezos Foundation partnered with Art Basel. I think it's still a partnership. It's happening again this year. And they were the only blockchain that was allowed on the floor at Basel, Miami. And I mean, the politics that go into that, of course, are like, why you guys, right? Because like, Lord knows the industry is flush with cash. It's no shortage of people who are willing to sponsor that. A lot of, I think, what the Basel folks saw was that we don't have an ethos of like PFP, like pump and dump type language, like floating around the ecosystem. It's mostly by artists for artists, and a lot of the purpose of the booth at Basel was actually educational. So there was no one hawking any profile pictures at you or whatever. It was purely like you go, you have an image generated, you capture it as an NFT, and then you're able to like open up a wallet. And for a lot of people, that was the first time they opened up a crypto wallet, and it really demystified that for them. And I think that's the attitude and ethos that should have been obviously from the jump in the whole industry, is one of learning, experimentation, curiosity, trying to like kind of push the envelope. And indeed, I think the end result was that the Tezos booth at Basel, Miami was its most visited booth ever. which is pretty cool. And there were lines out the door, and it was really fun. But I think the heart of it, and what was really cool, was like you saw 7-year-olds on their presumably parents' smartphones. Maybe 7-year-olds have smartphones now, taking opening up their first crypto wallet, but also 80-year-olds doing it. And the spirit was one of like education and learning. So yeah, I mean, I think anyone who tells you that like anything is a sure bet is, and also is selling you a token or something is, I mean, 99 times out of 100. Come on. But I think when you go into this stuff with like the ethos of hey, we're all just trying to learn, and this is a very intimidating topic, people relate to that and they like it. So we try to go in with that attitude, to Basel this year. But yeah, I think the fact that a lot of the art markets on other chains have kind of cratered. Will make for an interesting series of cocktail parties in Miami.
Great. Any more questions? Hands in the air. My colleagues will come over to you. Well, while you're thinking about that, just to follow up on the art angle, I wasn't aware that this was such a... Is it a passion for you to get involved in that, or where did that come from?
I respect stubborn people, and I think if you express yourself for a living, you and I will probably get along pretty well. So it's I was always interested in like the arts, but it wasn't my career choice, obviously. But I've had a really good time meeting a lot of the people in these ecosystems because like. They want to express themselves. They have like a voice that wants to be heard. Misan Harriman works pretty closely with us. He was on the main stage on Tuesday, and it's like these people they want to be heard, and they usually have something really great to say, and it's that sort of like feistiness that I love. So I think it's a natural. It's a natural partnership for me, but that's just because I relate to the energy of like wanting to be heard.
Right. Okay, any other questions? We've got a few more minutes here, so don't be shy. Do we have a hand at the back, or is that a phone going up? Oh, we got you at the front. Why not? Why not? We'll give you a second chance. Go for it.
Can I have a second one?
Go for it.
Awesome. So first of all, I would love to have a discussion about collaborating, because I think what you guys are doing is really cool. Secondly, my question is regards GAFAM entering the Web3. So we see a lot of the GAFAM companies entering the web space and exploring the Web3 space. So I would like to see or hear from you what your thoughts are about them entering the Web3 space.
Oh, you mean like the big existing tech companies and
GAFAM,
yeah.
Google, Amazon, Facebook,
Okay, yeah.
Apple, Microsoft.
Yes. Okay. New acronym, interesting. I didn't know that one. Yeah, I mean, listen, you have great engineers at a lot of these companies, and I think, until fairly recently, a lot of the ways that you would use a cryptocurrency, I mean, geez, half the sites are like a concrete parachute. They're impossible to use, and so if the end result of like every FANG company, kind of getting into the crypto space is that we have actually like a 10x better user experience because some genius from Google had to make that his problem for a few years. That's like the best case scenario for the industry to get some great user design for the first time in its history. But I think broadly, like you meet the people at these companies and they're super duper talented. I think at the end of the day, there's an irreverence that's at the heart of cryptocurrency culture. It's very internet driven. It's kind of like an internet phenomenon in its own right. And I don't think you're going to find that cheekiness coming out of like a press release from a large tech company. So I think like the heart of this stuff is always going to sit kind of with the communities that foster around it. But I think we're probably going to, hopefully, we'll have some great tooling that's built because we've got, a Meta or a Google or whatever, making this part of the problem that they're trying to solve.
Great. Any other questions? Oh, hand at the front here. Can we get a mic over to this lady, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Mirella. I'm from Austria, working for a blockchain technology consulting company called Caliber Consult. And we're looking into projects on Tezos because we are developing sort of like a new idea how to utilize NFTs for artists and just revamp it as a tool to also secure contracts and ownership of in a bigger scale than just the digital art. And I also learned about some projects you're running in Africa. So I was wondering, what do you have to do to pitch on Tezos? So what projects are you looking at the moment?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. So, basically, what kind of projects are being built on Tezos, and how are they pitched? Repetition doesn't spoil a prayer. I've been talking about gaming on blockchains for a long time, and one of the nice perks of the last few years is that two big gaming studios, CCP Games and Ubisoft, use the Tezos blockchain for some parts of their application. That's been fabulous. What gets me excited about this is that people talk a lot about how cryptocurrencies are going to disrupt and upend financial services in some form. All the banks are going to be shuttered or something like that. What you actually have on the internet today are fully fledged digital economies that don't have some of the complexity that's needed for some of the upending of complex financial services. Could these use a blockchain, and how is, I think, always going to be my favorite example of like a trial that we could all endeavor into. So I'm really excited about gaming, not so much in role, sort of like MMORPG style, like, oh, this is a sword that will be on the blockchain and you could use it, because no, I mean, RPG is like you have to basically run a movie studio in order to make any of those useful. And so, having a sword that's in one thing, like, fine, sure. It's cute, it's harmless, but I think what's more fun is tradable card games. So some of the most popular games are trading card games, and explicitly the trading bit has been eroded by the limitations of the design of the web. And so I think it's interesting to use a blockchain to kind of unearth that. And it's the same principle that makes digital art such a compelling use case, which is that, as long as the internet's been around, obviously people have been putting art on it in some form or another, but enforcing that scarcity and being able to trade those assets has always been a more vexing part of the equation. And a lot of very smart people have tried to solve it, but what seems to have happened is that cryptocurrencies were kind of the rails that were used for that sort of asset transfer, basically. So that gives me hope. I think there's a lot to learn from like the phenomenon of art coming up to the fore. I think this is kind of when we talk about Web3, as was mentioned at the beginning, I think this is the type of empowerment that people discuss. Like, I mostly through what I've seen in sort of traction in the Tezos community, it's very beloved in emerging markets because the gas fees are so low, and so it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to mint on Tezos. It costs like cents. And so what you see is like people who had to have like a side job or a side hustle just to make ends meet can now basically have customers anywhere in the world. It's costless for them to like express themselves. And guess what? Like and it's not bound by geography. Someone wants to pay them for it. And so it can improve someone's quality of life dramatically in certain parts of the world to basically have this global market for the first time in their life. I think there's probably essences of that and like other use cases that smell the same way. But the general principle is sound, and I think it's kind of beautiful. Like that's our best case scenario for the internet is like flattening the world in the best way.
Right, any more questions? We've got time for a few more, so get your hands up and we'll get a microphone over to you. Otherwise, Kathleen and I will go use the time to find Ben McKenzie somewhere. We'll go hunt him down in his hotel. No other questions? Well, Kathleen, it's been a pleasure having you on stage. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of your WebSummit. Ladies and gentlemen, Kathleen Breitman.